Good morning, and welcome to First Parish in Concord. My name is Virginia Taylor. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm honored to be a member of your governing board. Welcome one and all to worship this morning. First Parish is a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and love lies at the center of our faith. We gather to grow spiritually and ethically together as we adapt to a changing world. We seek to center and strengthen relationships by honoring our covenant to treat each other with respect and care, especially when disagreement or conflict arises. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we embrace our differences and commonalities with love and goodwill. While we never expect perfection, we do expect that members will take responsibility for their actions and engage in repair where needed. Welcome to all joining us both in our historic sanctuary and on Zoom. If you are visiting or new to the congregation, we extend especially warm greetings to you. If you need an assisted listening device or any other assistance during the worship service, please see one of our ushers at the rear of the sanctuary. Soul work materials are available at the entrance to the sanctuary. These small crafts and coloring pages can help people of all ages calm the body and focus the mind. During worship, the parlor downstairs serves as our wiggle room, where young ones can play while the service live streams on a large screen. Zoom participants are invited to stay online after the service for a time of conversation and fellowship. All present in the meeting house are welcome to enjoy coffee hour in the parish hall downstairs. For those who prefer a more intimate space to reflect on today's worship themes, you are invited to the worship sharing circle, also immediately after the service, and that's downstairs in the Brooks room. You can also join that by Zoom. As your governing board rep this morning, I'll be available during coffee hour for conversation and questions. I hope you'll come and say hello. Please check out the many announcements inserted in your order of service in the foyer of the sanctuary and outside the church office downstairs. Two events particularly worth lifting up today. This morning, immediately after the service, in the parlor is a newcomers and membership event. Whether you're still discerning what membership in this spiritual community might mean, or you're ready to sign the book today, join Reverend Jenna and members of the membership and welcome team for a conversation about the meaning of membership, and for those ready, an opportunity to sign the book. Secondly, all ages are welcome to come together and make signs for the No Kings Rally on October 18th. Drop into the Parish Hall on Tuesday, October 14th between 5 and 7 p.m. Poster boards and markers will be available. Please see FP Weekly for more information about the many other exciting activities and opportunities to strengthen our community and to connect with each other. Once again, welcome. To gather in worship is a sacred act, and your presence among us is a blessing. We are glad and grateful that you're here.
In many indigenous and earth-based traditions, situating oneself on the land that you're on is an important part of any gathering. The 4 cardinal directions in many Native American traditions carry layered meanings of importance, corresponding with the natural elements, the seasons of the year, and different times in the lifespan. So I'd like to invite you all to join me in calling in the directions. I've adapted these words from Euro-American UU pagan minister, Reverend Jane Altman Page. And let's begin by rising together in body or in spirit. I invite you to start to turn to face the east, which means turning around to face the back right corner of the sanctuary. We call out to the powers of the east representing air and the radiance of dawn. I invite you to think of places to the east of us where you have lived or visited, and all the breaths of air you took in those places, trading carbon dioxide for oxygen with the trees. And I invite you to bring into your heart friends and family, living and deceased, who live east of here, and call on those memories of times with them, as well as their spirits, to be with us here today. And now we're going to rotate toward the south. I think that's like clockwise, 90 degrees. The corner of the sanctuary where the organ is, so everyone can look at Simon. As we call on the powers of fire that the South represents, we lament how the climate crisis has increased the frequency and power of wildfires worldwide. We hear the cries of our Mother Earth warming too much and too quickly. I ask you to think of places to the south of us where you have lived or visited. I invite you to bring into your heart friends and family who live south of here, and call on those memories of times with them, and call on their spirits to be here with us today. Now we rotate to the west, the corner where the piano lives. We call out to the powers of the west, the power of water. I invite you to envision wonderful bodies of water to the west of us, where you have lived or visited. Perhaps the Hudson River, the Great Lakes, or even the expanse of the Pacific Ocean. I invite you to bring into your heart friends and families who live west of here, and call on those memories of times with them, as well as their spirits, to be here with us today. And finally, we'll shift to the north, this left corner in the back of the sanctuary, as we call out to the powers of the mighty earth, of stone and mountain. We honor the rolling northern range of the Appalachian Mountains and beyond. I invite you to think of places north of here where you have lived or visited, and to bring into your heart friends and family who live north of here, and call on those memories of times with them and their spirits to be here with us today. Thank you. You may now be seated. As we kindle our flaming chalice this morning, symbol of our shared Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, please join me in reading our chalice lighting words up on the screen from Reverend Michelle Collins. We light this chalice as we learn to hold both tenderness and strength. May this flame illuminate the wisdom to know when compassion calls us to offer comfort and when it demands courageous action.
I'm going to read the First Parish in Concord land acknowledgement. This is a statement that was based on collective work a few years ago at First Parish. It's still a work in progress. Let us begin with an acknowledgement, remembering that we at First Parish in Concord are settled upon the lands and enjoy the accumulated wealth derived from those lands, once inhabited by and still spiritually connected to Native American Algonquin tribes. In the 16th and 17th centuries, these inhabitants included the Nipmuc, the Massachusetts, the Pawtucket, or Pennacook peoples.
Hello, I'm Wendy Holt, she, her, and incidentally, a member of the 2025 winning First Parish trivia team. I think we all recognize that land acknowledgement is only a first step. The Reckoning and Repair Task Force is a newly created subgroup of the Racial Justice Action Group here at First Parish. Our goal is to explore First Parish's colonial history, to identify how early parishioners and the community benefited from the exploitation of indigenous peoples and from the business of enslavement. We recently received an $8,000 grant from the UUA's Social Action Justice Fund to support this work. And the Emma's Revolution concert next Saturday is a first step to raise $1,000 in order to earn another $1,000 in matching grant. We are grateful for and delving into the growing information about local indigenous peoples uncovered and being shared by their descendants. In addition, we have employed Robbins House researchers to examine municipal records from First Parish and other sources to learn more about the people who were enslaved, First Parish members who owned loaned slaves, and those who were engaged in slavery-based industries. We will be sharing our learning with you next year and creating opportunities to engage with you in a process of discernment, reflection, and reckoning with that history and exploring possible acts of reparation.
Thank you, Virginia and Wendy. I invite you all now to please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing our opening hymn this morning, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. It's at number 301 in the gray hymn books, and we are just going to be singing verses 1 through 3.
Good morning. I am Pat Brewer, and I would like to call the children to come forward so I can read you a story. So the children can come up here to the front. Do we have anybody? Yeah, not used to this part. I will read you the story. It is called When We Were Alone, and it is written by David Robertson. He is a member of the Norway House Cree Nation. And the illustrator is Julie Flett, who is also a member of the Cree Nation. And this is a story about a child and her grandmother. Today I helped my kukum in the flower garden. She always wears colorful clothes. It's like she dresses in rainbows. Nukum, why do you wear so many colors? I asked. Nukum said, well, Nusissum, when I was your age at home, in my community, my friends and I wore many different colors. But the school I went to, far away from home, they gave us different clothes to wear. All the children were dressed the same, and our clothes weren't colorful at all. We all mixed together like storm clouds. Why did you have to dress like that? I asked. They didn't like that we were such beautiful colors, Nukum said. They wanted us to look like everybody. But sometimes in the fall, when we were alone and the leaves had turned to their warm autumn hues, we would roll around on the ground. We would pile the leaves over our clothes that they had given us, and we would be colorful again. And this made us happy. Now, Nukum said, I always wear the most colorful clothes. After I helped with the flowers, we went over to the back gate. There were vines covering the gate, and they reached all the way to the ground. When my kukum turned to fix the latch, I saw her braid almost as long as the vines. Nukum, why do you wear your hair so long? I asked. Nukum said, well, Nusissum, when I was your age, at home in my community, my friends and I grew our hair long, just like our people have always done. It made us feel strong and proud. But at the school I went to, far away from home, they cut off all our hair. Our strands of hair mixed together on the ground like blades of dead grass. Why did you have to wear your hair like that? I asked. They didn't like that we were proud, Nukum said. They wanted us to be like everybody else. But sometimes in the spring, when we were alone and the grass had grown so long and thick in the field, we would pick the blades from the ground. We would braid them into short hair that they had given us. And we would have long hair again. And this made us happy. Now, Nukum said, I always wear my hair very long. After my kukum had fixed the latch, I followed her to the birdhouse. There was a bird flying through the air like a jingle-dress dancer. And she fed the bird, and she whispered, Na, Pirasis, Machiso, Tamasikatian, Tamaskayasian. Here, little bird, eat, so you will grow big and strong. When I was your age at home in my community, My friends and I always spoke our language, but at the school I went to, far away from home, they wouldn't let us speak our words. All the children used their strange words, and we didn't understand them at all. Our voices blend together like a flock of crows. Why did you have to talk their language? I asked. They didn't like that we spoke our language, Newcomb said. They wanted us to talk like everybody else. But sometimes in the summer, when we were alone and our teachers weren't anywhere around the place we were, we would whisper to each other in Cree. We would say all the words we weren't allowed to say so that we wouldn't forget them. And this made us happy. Now, Newcomb said, I always speak my language. After our gardening was done, I sat with my Kukum in the backyard. Her brother came over and sat with us. He comes over all the time. We drank tea and we ate bannock. Newcomb, why do you and Nokomis always spend time together? I asked. Newcomb said, well, Nusissum, when we were your age at home in our community, being with family was the most important thing. We played with each other, did chores together, and shared everything. But at school, I went too far away from home. They wouldn't let us be together. My brother and I were separated, like day and night. Why were you and Nokomis separated? I asked. They didn't like when we were with family, Newcomb said. Because when we were together, we thought too much of home. But sometimes in the winter, when we were alone and we were sure that nobody could see us, we would find each other. We would take off our mitts, and in the crisp, cold air, we would hold hands so we could be together with each other. And this made us happy. Now, Newcomb said as she reached over and held my uncle's hand and mine, I am always with family. Thanks. I guess there's no one to go.
Thank you, Pat, very much for reading to us this morning. So this morning for RE, Emma and Meg and Tyler and I are going up to the Emerson room to make care packages for recent graduates. And if there are any children that would like to join us, meet us in the Emerson room. Thank you.
During this time of what many have dubbed a polycrisis, wherein multiple different kinds of crises, from economic to geopolitical to environmental to social, intersect with and amplify each other, a lot of us are looking for wisdom for how to navigate these times. And I hope to get there by the end of today's 3 reflections. inspired by the Indigenous voices I've been engaging with these past few weeks. But to back up a little bit first, in our Time for All Ages story, written by Cree author David Robertson and read so beautifully by Pat, we got a glimpse into what life in a Native American residential boarding school was like for Indigenous folks growing up across North America. We saw the ways in which the girl's Kokum, her grandmother, was forced to suppress her native language and cultural traditions so that she could assimilate at this boarding school. Boarding schools, horrifying as they were also just one site of cultural erasure and even cultural genocide, a violence that has been baked into our country's origins since its founding. As Wendy mentioned, the Repair and Reconciliation Task Force is trying to learn more about manifestations of this violence, displacement, and cultural erasure that happened right here in Concord, right here, perhaps more to the point, at First Parish. Before we even get to today's theme, Indigenous Wisdom for the Polycrisis, it's important to remember that many of the crises we face in 2025 are themselves rooted in the settler colonialism that this country, and other countries to be sure, were founded on. Celine Lim, an Indigenous Kayan leader from Sarawak on the island of Borneo, reminded me this past week that it was the suppression, the denial of Indigenous wisdom in the first place that helped create the very conditions of the polycrisis we now face. And Dr. Lila June Johnston, an environmental anthropologist of Navajo, Cheyenne, and European lineages, adds, the convergence of crises that we are experiencing now was also, in fact, set into motion a long, long time ago. And why, she asks, are we so shocked that this is happening? And I take her to mean the climate crisis, the global rise of authoritarianism, and the growing tide of global violence. We've been saying this for centuries, she says, and yet we kept brutalizing each other, kept brutalizing the earth, and the earth can only take so much. So during today's 3 reflections, I will be lifting up wisdom from Indigenous leaders and thinkers around the globe, and you'll get to see their pictures for a couple minutes at a time. A lot of the excerpts and learnings come from one particular podcast called Holding the Fire, Indigenous Voices for the Great Unraveling by the Post-Carbon Institute. In your Sunday announcements insert, we've shared the name of this resource and a few others, so you can actually go back and listen yourselves, and I really encourage you to do so. There's so much wisdom in each episode. And so, in a way, this first reflection is all about values. Which values and whose values have been privileged and propagated here in the United States, here in New England, and which values and whose values have been silenced since 1776, since even 1492. How do we hold fast to one set of values as we find them so contradicted by the values of our current administration? And how do we hold or sit with the great paradox that underlies this moment of polycrisis? And by that, I mean the settler colonialism that undergirded our UU ancestors, the Puritans, beginning right here in New England, with the fact that our Unitarian Universalist values now, inspired at their best by Indigenous spiritual teachings, can offer ways forward in this particular moment in time. Through our teachings like honoring the interconnected web of all existence, through values like generosity, and the reminder that we are all connected in mutual webs of giving and receiving. We hold in our very DNA as Unitarian Universalists a both and. And what on earth do we do with that? An exploration into Indigenous wisdom for the unraveling must begin from this place, must honor this tension, the both and of it all. So that's where we begin the story today.
Our first anthem is an arrangement of Chante Washte Hokshila, a Lakota lullaby sung by mothers to their young boys, but still sung to all children, regardless of gender. Composer Linthicum Blackhorse is a two-spirit Lakota musician who is intentionally working to preserve the Lakota language and to share it through their music. Linthicum Blackhorse says, "Old songs are often mistaken for having no words because many of the ancient vocabulary were single syllables and, to the non-native speaker or singer, they sound like meaningless vowels. Reviving the meanings behind many of these songs has proven to be rewarding and frustrating, since most of our living elders were persecuted for using the language or singing the songs." With the help of Linthicum Blackhorse's excellent pronunciation guide, we will be singing the piece in Lakota. And here is a translation. "I have brought you here so that I can speak to you in your language. I have brought you here so that you will recognize me. My kind-hearted boy, I beg you to fall asleep. The night is good. I am speaking your language."
As a community of faith and spirit, we rejoice in each other's joys and we bear witness to each other's sorrows. This morning, we hold in our hearts Mel and Laura Bernstein, who report that they have made a transition. They're now living in assisted living at the Commons in Lincoln. They send warm hellos to their First Parish friends and wish you all well. What else and who else and where else are you holding on your hearts this morning? We know that our prayers these days do not come from the ministers alone. As a spiritual community, we hold many griefs and joys and concerns and prayers of gratitude simultaneously every day that we gather. And so as you feel moved, you are invited to type into the chat box if you're watching online, or share aloud quietly from the pews if you are here in the sanctuary, your own joy, sorrow, or prayer that you are holding today, or the name of someone or someplace that is close to your heart this week. And let us now hold a moment of loving silence for all that has been shared in those prayers that still remain in the quiet corners of our hearts. And let us wind down this time of prayer and meditation with a moment to ground together, to engage in the spiritual practice of grounding. If you are able to put both of your feet squarely on the ground, I invite you to do so. And as you do, I invite you to feel the gift of this earth element that is always holding us, to regulate your nervous system through the energy of Mother Earth coursing up from the ground as we feel into our rootedness to this place, feeling our ties of kinship to all places and all people. Let us take a few centering breaths together, breathing in and out, aware of the gift of another of the four elements, which is air. You are invited to continue to connect your sensing body to the gifts of the elements of earth and air as you listen to our centering music, which is an improvisation in the style of a Zuni flute tradition. Aslak Holmberg is an indigenous Sami who lives on the Diatanu River on the border of present-day Norway and Finland. Aslak teaches that for many indigenous folks across the globe, especially those who still live on their ancestral lands, it is part of the cosmology, or in other words, their understanding of the workings of the world, to consider themselves part of the natural environment. Backing up a little bit, Aslak is a fisherman, so the example he uses to illustrate this point is about local versus global markets. If you think about a grocery store, for instance, he says, the globalized market brings to your table food from all around the world, from ecosystems you haven't even heard of. You don't know what they're like, where they are, or what the impact of the production is of whatever you are feeding yourself with. If you buy unsustainable products, then you don't immediately see the impacts, because you can buy unsustainable products from somewhere else if one ecosystem is ruined. On the other hand, in his worldview, as a Sami fisherman living on and stewarding his ancestral lands, what happens to the environment happens to you. If you don't uphold sustainable practices, he says, you will feel the impacts immediately. If you overfish one lake, then you won't have fish the next year. The way Aslak understands sustainability goes beyond just a generic environmental ethic. It is intimately connected to the indigenous concept of kinship, being bound up, human and non-human environment alike, in relationships of mutuality, care, reciprocity, and responsibility. The phrase that Dr. Yuria Seledwin, a senior fellow at the Other and Belonging Institute at the UC Berkeley and a native of Nahua and Maya descent from modern-day Chiapas, Mexico, the language that she uses to talk about kinship is something that she calls an ethic of belonging. Under an ethic of belonging, she says, we feel that we are family with everything that exists. There is a sense of kin relationality, of sensing that everything that exists is a relative. And there's also a sense of ecological belonging, that we belong to these networks of responsive, living, active beings to whom we owe our service. And finally, the image that Dilafruz Konikboyeva, an indigenous Pamiri from modern-day Tajikistan, uses to describe kinship is the house that she grew up in, and the houses that so many Pamiris grow up in. Dilafruz explains that her house was designed for intergenerational living. They are open spaces, and in that they have different places where elders sit, different places where mothers sit, and so on. It's a beautiful concept, she explains, where you're never meant to be away from your family. You are always embedded and imbued and raised communally in that space. Their house was also built entirely around nature. If you look up to the roof, there are 4 cutouts, which represent the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. There are also 5 pillars in the house that represent different deities in nature. So, she says, we can't think about self without thinking about family, which is not only extended blood, but also includes the natural elements. It's worth lifting up again that these 3 voices, Aslak, Yuria, and Dilafruz, come from indigenous communities as far from each other as modern-day Norway, Mexico, and Tajikistan. It's not to say that indigenous communities and practices across the globe are monolithic by any means, but that they share important foundational understandings about the world that the forces of colonialism rooted out to all of our detriment. And so, as we find ways to respond to the polycrisis that we are in, let us continue learning from our Indigenous siblings and cousins about how to relate to the world and each other through a lens of kinship, of kin relationality and ecological belonging, about how to see this planet indeed as our shared home, even as other forces try to make us forget that essential truth. In our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, generosity is a spiritual practice, like the generosity of the choir for lending their voices to us this morning in both beautiful anthems. For the month of October, the plate collection will be joyfully shared with the Robbins House. Built in 1823, the Robbins House sits just steps away from the North Bridge. And the goals of the Robbins House, as we heard a little bit earlier from Wendy, include unearthing and disseminating the stories of Concord's earliest African Americans, creating related educational resources, and promoting social justice dialogue. Partnering with our Racial Justice Action Group this year, they're helping to unearth the related and expanded history of First Parish in the colonial era. Jen Turner, Executive Director of the Robbins House, is here with us somewhere today. Hi, Jen. You can look out for her at coffee hour to learn more about their important work and ways you can support them. The offering collection will now be generously given and gratefully received. I was recently listening to yet another podcast. I spent a lot of time in traffic on Route 128. Anyone else out there with me? Some of you. This was the Gratitude Blooming podcast, and the interviewee was Zen master and Indigenous Hawaiian Norma Wong. Norma was being interviewed about her new book that came out last year titled When No Thing Works, which shares both Indigenous and Zen wisdom about living what she calls in the time-place of collapse, when no thing works. They have a practice on this podcast of picking a card from this kind of nature-based card deck at the beginning of every interview. And at the beginning of the interview with Norma, they picked the dandelion card. Norma was then asked to reflect on how the image of the dandelion resonates with themes from her book and themes from this apocalyptic moment. And I might ask Arkady to put on the slide so you can get a visual of Norma. Thank you. Norma paused before noting that dandelions are both stubborn and tenacious. Interesting. Dandelions, she added later, do not particularly seem to mind that some of their seeds, many of their seeds actually, do not ever find fertile ground. Some of the dandelion seeds, once picked up by the wind, land on asphalt. Only a small percentage really ever land on nurturing ground, eventually able to take root and carry on the original dandelion's lineage. But the point isn't that all of the seeds will or have to. I found this so fascinating, using the dandelion as a metaphor for movement work, especially in these times. Often, the podcast host Omar Bronson chimed in, when we think about transformation, we think about the imagery of the caterpillar becoming a cocoon, becoming a butterfly. It's linear. And in some miraculous way, all of the components that make the caterpillar caterpillary then make a cocoon cocoony and a butterfly butterfly-y. Everything from the raw material of the caterpillar is used in the process of transformation. But the logic of the dandelion is pretty different. The wind carries so many of those seeds right onto unfertile ground. And sometimes it feels like the work of transformation is more like this, doesn't it? One theme that was common across so many of the interviews on that first Post-Carbon Institute podcast was that Indigenous wisdom from across the globe emphasizes this notion of persisting with the work, staying in line with your values and your identity, no matter the results. No matter if the last 50, the last 100 seeds from the dandelion land on unforgiving asphalt. No matter if the last dozen social justice actions felt like they failed to enact real change. Many of the Indigenous thought leaders we've heard from today, and you need only look at our own history to understand why, many of them spoke about how they are not strangers to what it feels like to fight a losing battle. And yet there is a certain amount of grace and power that comes from holding fast to your values, even if or when your values become the minority opinion. In 2025, Indigenous communities manage only a small portion of the land that makes up the Earth's surface, around 1/4 of that land. And yet research shows that many of the world's most ecologically intact regions overlap with those same territories that are indigenously stewarded. Where Indigenous peoples retain rights and stewardship, biodiversity thrives. Our Indigenous siblings and cousins have known for a long time that even if we can't save everything, all that we can save is still worth saving. So let us follow their lead. May it be so, and amen. And now I want to invite you to please rise in body or spirit to join in singing our closing hymn at number 1022 in the Teal Book, Woyaya.
We are
You can actually stay standing, because just as we extinguish our chalice to mirror its lighting at the start of our service, I invite you to join me in releasing and bidding farewell to the four directions. So please join me in facing the north, the back of the sanctuary toward the left corner. Spirits of the north, spirits of the earth, we commit to staying in greater touch with you, aware of all of the gifts, the shelter, the food, the grounding, the warmth that you give us. We thank you for this hour, and we bid you farewell. And the west, counterclockwise toward the piano. Spirits of the west, spirits of the water, we commit to using your gifts to remind ourselves to stay fluid and flexible in the face of the rigidness of division and domination that threatens us. We thank you for this hour, and we bid you farewell. And we'll rotate together to the south toward the organ. Spirits of the south, spirits of fire, we commit to not letting our own flames of passion and witness peter out in our grief or in our despair. We thank you for this hour, and we bid you farewell. And finally, the east. Spirits of the east, spirits of air, we commit to using the gifts of air and our breath to speak on behalf of the interconnected web of all existence and everything that threatens that sacred, that most sacred notion of kinship. We thank you for this hour, and we bid you farewell. And now I invite you to return to center as we say our traditional benediction together. Go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no person evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings. Please be seated to enjoy the postlude.